Okay, this is an audio lecture on 3 of the Greek tragedies we are reading in this class: Antigone by Sophocles, Medea by Euripides, and Agamemnon by Aeschylus, which is in the book The Oresteia. You should have opened the PowerPoint titled 3 Tragedies. This is a lecture companion PowerPoint, so this goes with what I'm going to be talking about today. This will be a significantly shorter lecture than the lecture on Oedipus Rex, because I'm asking you to also participate in a discussion board on this play, or not this play, sorry, this group of plays that will cover a lot of material as well. So let's begin. So we're on slide 3 here. We're going to start with Antigone. The reason for this is we just read Oedipus Rex, and also because Medea and Agamemnon talk about similar things. So, as the PowerPoint says, this is the third of Sophocles' Theban plays, and it follows the characters, several of them, that we first met in Oedipus Rex. Another play has happened in between this. The reason we're not reading that one is it's not particularly interesting. If you remember, at the end of Oedipus Rex, Antigone, Oedipus' daughter and sister, gross, left to go to the Cithaeron Mountains, and Oedipus at Colonus takes place there. Basically, Oedipus talks for a long time, and Oedipus dies, and Antigone goes home. Several years have passed since then, by the time we get into this text. What has happened, some background for you, is that Polynices and Eteocles, who were the two brothers of Antigone, and the sons of Oedipus, and brothers of Oedipus, were at once time-sharing their reigns. So basically, they were taking turns being in charge, one for 1 year, one for another. Well, civil war breaks out because Polynices is greedy and wants to become king. So Eteocles defends Thebes, whereas Polynices fights against Thebes. Both men die. Civil war ends. Creon becomes the king, and he decrees that no one should honor or bury Polynices because of his betrayal. The reason this is significant is because the belief in ancient Greece was that if your body was not buried, you could not successfully cross over into the afterlife. You would be a wandering spirit. And so the idea here is that Polynices is not only being shamed and dishonored, but he is not being allowed to rest. Next slide. What ends up happening, the central conflict here, is that Antigone, as the play suggests, as happens in the play, Antigone defies Creon, and she buries her brother, despite the potential punishment of being killed or buried alive. When Creon discovers that it was Antigone who did this, he does have her sealed up in a tomb. He offers to give her food. So he's going to bury her alive, but he's going to leave her alive. Part of the reason for this is people keep telling him not to do this. They're convinced that he is making the wrong decision, but as we'll look at his motivation in a minute, he is making what he thinks is the right choice. Antigone ends up hanging herself. Creon's son Hymen kills himself as well, and then so does Creon's wife, Eurydice. So everybody around Creon dies. He does realize, though it is too late, that he has made the wrong decision and tries to rectify things, but as always, it is too late. So that's what happens in the play. So we're going to look at a couple of themes and passages fairly quickly. I've identified in the PowerPoint which passages we're going to look at. So the first question that comes up is, what is going on with Creon? He is the king, and a lot of readers accuse him of being greedy and power hungry, but I'm not entirely convinced. So let's start on page 8. There's a lengthy passage. This is Creon speaking, and this is page 8 of the Dover Thrift Edition. If you don't have it, this is one of his early lengthy speeches after the chorus has first spoken. So he says, "Him too who sets a friend before his native land I prize at nothing. God, who seest all things always, witness it. If I perceive where safety should have been, mischief advancing toward my citizens, I will not sit in silence, nor account as friend to me the country's enemy. But thus I deem, she is our ark of safety, and friends are made then only when, embarked upon her deck, we ride the sea upright. Such are the laws by which I mean to further this city's welfare, and akin to these I have given orders to the citizens touching the sons of Oedipus." Blah, 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 blah. This is a very important passage because it actually tells us what it is that Creon is concerned about. Yes, he is stubborn, but he is king, and he is trying to demonstrate in this passage that his greatest concern is the safety of the city of Thebes. He prizes no one who sets an individual above the city. So to him, the city as a whole is the most important. A little bit of context is very important here. What's happened is Thebes has essentially been destroyed in some ways. Their morale is very low. Things are not going well. And Creon is trying to raise popular morale. And by saying that no one is more important than my city, he is trying to do that. This guy Polynices went against our city, so we should not give him honor. So let's also take a look at page 12. There's a passage here. So, what he says towards the beginning is important. To say that guardian deities would care for this dead body is intolerable. Could they, by way of supereminent honor paid to a benefactor, give him burial, who came to fire their lands, their pillared fanes, and sacred treasures, and set laws at naught? Or do you see gods honoring the bad? 'Tis false. So here he is arguing that the gods are on his side, that the gods would not want this man to be buried, because the honor of the city is so important. Okay, let's look at page 25 as well. He's talking to Hymen at this point. So is it right, my son, to be disposed in everything to back your father's quarrel? It is for this men prayed, to breed and rear in their homes dutiful offspring, to require the foe with evil and their father's friend honor, as did their father. Whoso gets children unserviceable, what else could he be said to breed, but troubles for himself, and store of laughter for his enemies? Nay, never fling away your wits, my son. Going down a few more pages, or lines, sorry. Leave her to wed some bridegroom in the grave, for having caught her in the act alone on the whole city disobeying me, I will not publicly belie myself, but kill her. Now let her glorify her god of kindred. So what he's saying here is that Antigone is the only one who has betrayed him, and he, even though she is royalty, cannot let her get away with this. So one of the big things that we're seeing in these two passages, you might want to go to slide 6, is the biggest conflict, the biggest theme here. Man's law versus higher law. Antigone argues that because what she believes in conflicts with what Creon has decreed, she is doing no wrong. She argues that she is following the law of the gods, or the greater good, rather than man's law. She says this on page 17, at the very bottom. Because it was not Zeus who ordered it, nor justice, dweller with the nether gods, gave such a law to men, nor did I deem your ordinance of so much binding force, as that a mortal man could overbear. The unchangeable, unwritten code of heaven, this is not of today and yesterday, but he lives forever, having origin whence no man knows, whose sanction I were loath in heaven's sight to provoke, etc., etc. So she is saying here, your law is not aligned with the God's law. He says otherwise. So both of these characters think they're doing what the gods want. Eventually, the chorus gets involved. We've talked about the chorus before. This is way on page 24 in Roman numeral 2, item 1. They say, Thy power, O God, what pride of man constraineth, which neither sleep that all things else enchanteth, nor even the tireless moons of heaven destroy. Thy throne is founded fast, high in Olympus, in great brilliancy, far beyond time's annoy. Through past and through future and through past abideth one decree. Not in excess enters the life of man without unhappiness. So what the chorus is saying here is that the God's law is significantly more important than man's law. Now, Creon believes that he is doing the right thing. We'll get to that in a second. But what we're seeing is Antigone also thinks that she's doing the right thing. So Antigone is often painted as the heroine of the story. But really, think about it. Creon is actually simply trying to do what it is that he thinks is right. So this isn't about pride or having power over other people. He is doing what he thinks is right. Towards the end, though, it becomes quite clear that Creon acknowledges he was wrong. This is at the bottom of page 50 in Roman numeral 4, letter 1, number 1. Woe is me, to none else can they lay it, this guilt but to me. I was the slayer, I say it, unhappy of thee. O bear me, haste ye, spare not, to the ends of earth. More nothing than they who were not in the hour of birth. Here he's accepting culpability. He's accepting that, okay, I thought I was doing what the gods wanted, but I was wrong. And obviously the fact that he loses everything is supposed to have something to do with this. Let's go to slide number 7. So one of the big questions is Creon really doing anything wrong here? Remember, he is trying to rebuild Thebes, and one of the issues he has to deal with is, okay, he's made this decree with the right intentions, right? This person went against the throne, went against the city. He's trying to rebuild morale, so he's saying, we're not going to bury this guy. This is what happens when you mess with Thebes. But then his own relative buries her brother. She claims that she's doing what is right. It's easy for us to sit back and say, well, Creon should have listened. But what if he does that? If he gives her preferential treatment, he doesn't look like a very fair king at a time when Thebes is really struggling. So it's really hard to say that Creon's done anything wrong. One of the other important questions is whether he suffers appropriately. Remember, the notion of catharsis was in the PowerPoint from last time. And to remind you, that's this notion that characters go through bad things to give a moment of release for the audience. So we're seeing bad decisions by Creon that come from the right place. So we see him suffer for his bad choices, but we also see him come to the realization that he was not doing what the gods wanted. One of the other questions that I want you to think about, and this is particularly tricky with this play, a little less tricky with Medea and Agamemnon, but certainly still tricky, is that this play is titled Antigone. Usually the title goes with the main character. Is Antigone the main character? That's something I would like you to think about. What the conflict is. There's obviously a conflict between Antigone and Creon. There's obviously conflicts between several other characters, but also the big conflict between what kind of right is being done versus what kind of wrong. So think about those things as you post your comments on this play. I'll be interested to see what people think of these various characters. Okay, let's turn to Medea. Probably the most incisive play and divisive play in that it divides people in what they think of this character. So to give you a little bit of background, again, a lot of this is filtered into the play itself, and if you're reading carefully, you might pick up on a lot of this. But again, the background of all of these stories, Antigone's story of Medea, the story of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon, would have been known by most of the audience members. But just to give everybody a recap, Medea is a sorceress who helps Jason and the Argonauts retrieve the Golden Fleece. Jason is sent on this mission, an impossible mission. Medea uses magic to help him. She even betrays her father. She basically convinces a bunch of priestesses, her sisters, to kill and eat their father. And then she also chops up her own brother, leaves his body parts in the water so that the fleet that is chasing after Jason, led by her family, has to stop and gather those pieces so that she and Jason and the other Argonauts can escape unscathed. She abandons her family because she is madly in love with him. Madly, perhaps being a very operative word here. That all happens before the play. By the time the play takes place, they have had 2 kids, and Jason has decided to take another wife, abandoning Medea and their 2 children. Move on to slide number 9. Medea is known by King Creon. This is a different Creon, by the way. This is the king of Corinth, not the king of Thebes, but they very conveniently use the same name. King Creon of Corinth, where she and Jason live when the play takes place. He knows that she is very tricky and ruthless, so he banishes her. She does trick him into letting her have one more day in Corinth, and it is not poorly spent. She sends her children with poison gifts, a crown and a dress, which caused the death of the king and his daughter, who was supposed to marry Jason. She then kills her own sons and escapes with their bodies. So that's your basic plot. So what's going on here? First thing we want to look at is what is motivating each of our 2 main characters, Medea and Jason. And what we're really seeing from Medea is a couple of things. You'll see these 3 things on the next slide, slide number 10. What she's doing here is lamenting the plight of women. We'll take a look at a couple passages. And also, I think an interesting question is whether she actually loves Jason or not. And of course, there's the important question of why she kills her kids. So let's take a look at a couple passages for each of these. We get first on page 8. Again, this is the Dover Thrift edition. Hopefully you have that one. Towards the bottom of the page. This is one of Medea's first long speeches. I just want to look at a little part of this. She says, "We women are the most unfortunate creatures. Firstly, with an excess of wealth, it is required for us to buy a husband and take for our bodies a master. For not to take one is even worse. And now the question is serious whether we take a good or bad one, for there is no easy escape for a woman, nor can she say no to her marriage. She arrives among new modes of behavior and manners, and needs prophetic powers, unless she has learned at home how best to manage him who shares the bed with her." She continues on to talk about all of the terrible things that women have to suffer. So she's really giving us insights into the things that women have to suffer, that they have a very crappy cast in life. They are subsumed to husbands. They have to find a good husband. They are defined by their husband, and she finds this very unfair. She even says a little later, much later actually, page 28 to 29, here she says, "Let me give up anger, for the gods are kind to me. Have I not children, and do I not know that we in exile from our country must be short of friends? When I considered this, I saw that I had shown great lack of sense, and that my anger was foolish." Jumping to the top, page 29. "But we women are what we are, perhaps a little worthless, and you men must not be like us in this, nor be foolish in return when we are foolish. Now I give in and admit that when I was wrong, that then I was wrong. I have come to a better understanding now." There's two very different sentiments. Now, the reason for this is because she's now talking to Jason. This is her conniving phase. She is saying all the things that a man like Jason would want to hear. Oh, we women are weak. We're incapable. We're emotional. This is very different from the plight that she is talking about. But women have to act this way because this is what is expected of them. They're expected to be weak, to be subservient. But what is very interesting is I think she really does love Jason. On page 2, the nurse is talking towards the beginning of the play to say, she calls upon the gods to witness what sort of return Jason has made to her love. She lies without food and gives herself up to suffering, washing away every moment of the day in tears. So she's mourning. She is mourning that she does not have her husband anymore. She obviously clearly still does care about him and is very much hurt and devastated by his decision to take a new wife. And this would have really been a problem for her. Even if she was able to escape with her kids alive, they were in for a bad life. Being the cast-off sons of a king would have essentially ended their lives. As kids that were going to have no life, they had nothing. So I think this is important to keep track of when we think about why Medea kills her children. First, let's look at page 26. "Next after that, for I shall kill my own children. My children, there is none who can give them safety. And when I have ruined the whole of Jason's house, I shall leave the land and flee from the murder of my dear children. And I shall have done a dreadful deed. For it is not bearable to be mocked by enemies, so it must happen." So here we are seeing her say, I can't be mocked by my enemies, but I can't let someone else use my kids to do that. But she also says, there are none who can give them safety. They will never be safe. The fact that they were a part of this thing will never keep them safe, and better to have them die at her hand than someone else's. She says this, and that's her idea here, is she said, it is better for me to have killed them, basically, than for someone else to do it. I had to use them for revenge. And also, like I said, as the sons of a man who has cast them out, they're basically orphans. Orphans in Greece were not going to do well. A single mother with kids in Greece not going to have a good life. So she really does believe that ending their lives is a better decision. But she also is using them to get back at Jason. I don't want to ignore the revenge idea. This is on page 45, right at the very end of the play. Medea says, I will bury them myself, bearing them to Hera's temple on the promontory, so that no enemy may evilly treat them by tearing up their grave. In this land of Corinth I shall establish a holy feast and sacrifice each year forever to atone for the blood guilt. And I myself go to the land of Erechtheus, to dwell in Aegeus' house, the son of Pandion, while you, as is right, will die without distinction, struck on the head by a piece of the Argo's timber, and you will have seen the bitter end of my love. So we're seeing both here. She knows that somebody else could do something terrible to her kids, and she doesn't want that to happen. But she's also getting back at Jason. The reason she kills him is to get to Jason. And this is tied into what motivates Jason. The notion of glory and honor is very, very important to him. This is on page 18. We're moving back. The ends of the earth nobody would have heard of you. For my part, rather than stores of gold in my house, or power to sing even sweeter songs than Orpheus, I choose the fate that made me a distinguished man. There is my reply to your story of my labors. So he wants the fate that makes him distinguished. Honor and glory are important to him. He does say that he's doing this for the kids a little bit further down. But I don't think we're supposed to believe that. You know, he even, on the next page, says, "Make sure of this. It is not because of a woman I made the royal alliance in which I now live. But as I said before, I wish to preserve you and breed a royal progeny to be brothers to the children I have now, a sure defense to us." He wants honor. He wants glory. He wants to be known for being royalty. And this is he laments this on page 43. "You hateful thing, you woman most utterly loathed by the gods and me and by all the race of mankind. You who have had the heart to raise a sword against your children, you their mother, and left me childless." So the fact that he has no descendants is very, very significant here. You know, part of what Jason wants is to have a lineage that's important. We've seen this several times, right? We saw this in Hesi, we saw this in Apollodorus. But having lineage is very important. By killing his children, Medea has taken away that very important thing. Let's move on to slide 11. So the big question here is who is right. Medea is accused of killing her children out of simple revenge. And again, the one thing I want you to take away from this, I'm not suggesting that we should say, yeah, Medea did the perfectly right thing by killing her kids. I'm not justifying the murder of children. What I am suggesting is we need to see from her perspective. She certainly actually does believe that things will be worse for them if they remain alive. She is trying to get back at Jason. I don't want to take revenge out of the equation. But it's hard to say that she's simply crazy. Some argue she's just crazy. This lady's crazy. You know, and in our contemporary world, we see stories of mothers and fathers who do these sorts of things and are deemed very much mentally unstable. Certainly not saying that she's of the rightest mind, Medea, but I don't want to see people write, "This lady is just crazy," because that's, I think, inaccurate. One thing that I think is important is Euripides is often called the first feminist. Euripides is our playwright here. And he is bringing to light the struggles that women would have suffered. This would not have been a common thing to talk about. Women were seen as weaker, as unimportant. And for Euripides to try to shed light on the plight of the female is actually fairly progressive for the time period. Another play that looks at the plight of women is Agamemnon. So let's turn to that play now. We're almost done, I promise. We only have 4 slides to go, I guess. But just to give some backstory, again, a lot of this comes up in the play, but it can be hard to sort of navigate because I recognize that the language is a little outmoded. Agamemnon is the first play in the revenge trilogy known as the Oresteia by Aeschylus. This first play, tells the story of what happens when Agamemnon returns from war in Troy. It's been 10 years that he's been at war. He's on his way back. The first play here that we read details the plot by Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's wife, to exact murderous revenge on her husband. The latter two plays focus on Orestes, the son of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon, and his revenge on his mother for the murder of his father. So this is all about revenge. So there's a fairly obvious comparison here, if we turn to slide 13, between Medea and Clytemnestra. Both women are seeking vengeance against a man who has wronged her. So let's figure out how is it that Clytemnestra has been wronged. On page 42 to 43, we find out, because she tells us exactly why she's getting revenge. So we've got, Clytemnestra says, "I think neither was this man's death ignoble." Sorry, this is on page 40, very bottom of page 42. "I think neither was this man's death ignoble." Missing line. "For did he not also bring ruin on the house through treachery? Yes, my child by him which I raised, the much lamented Iphigenia. What his actions deserved, he deservedly suffers. So let him make no great boast in Hades, now that he is paid for just that deed, felled in death by the sword." So one thing she's really mad about is, before being able to leave for Troy, Agamemnon had angered at one of the gods. And so he had to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia in order to get friendly winds to let his ships leave the harbor. Easy thing to say is, wow, what a dick, should not have killed his daughter. Again, we have to put this in context, though. Agamemnon is the leader of a fleet. He is helping the king of... he is helping... I'm blanking. One of the protagonists, we'll say that for the moment, of the Iliad, help get his wife back. Menelaus, there we are. Helping Menelaus get his wife Helen back. It would look really bad for the king to not go keep his promise. So he has to think for the greater good. In some ways, this is like what Creon is trying to do. Agamemnon is thinking for the whole fleet and their reputation over his child. Now, in some versions of the story, Iphigenia is whisked away and turned into a bird. But Clytemnestra obviously didn't know that. She's really pissed off about the killing of her daughter. So that's one of the reasons she chooses to kill her husband. She's also pissed that he has brought another woman home. This is page 40. Let's see, I want to pick the right. Here we go. Down toward the bottom. Here he lies, his own wife's defiler, me here, the charmer of any Chryseis under Troy. And here is the woman captive, both portent seer and sharer of his couch, the prophecy-telling faithful bedmate, playing the ship's benches like a loon. The two of them have not done without their proper honor. That is why he lies here like this, and she does too, his lover, after singing her last death-laden lament like a swan. And for me, their bed has brought an added relish for my luxuriance. So she's pissed off about Agamemnon bringing home a war prize. But here's the thing. Cassandra was not a willing participant. What would happen regularly when cities were sacked is the women would be taken as sex slaves. So really, as much as we may think it appalling that Agamemnon has taken a war prize, this is something that would have just been normal, expected for the time. Cassandra's obviously not a willing participant, so the fact that Clytemnestra kills her too might give us pause. But then we also have the problem of Aegisthus. He is Clytemnestra's lover. We see him appear at the end of mid-page 44 and in page 45. The chorus says that against those who were newly from fighting, while you had kept the house at home and violated the husband's bed as well, did you plan this death for their commander? So he was helping. So her revenge is a little different from Medea's, isn't it? So I want you to think about how. I'm not going to tell you. I want that to be something you think about for the discussion board. So one of the other important things from this play and Medea is the woman's role. And these are passages from Agamemnon. So let's look quickly at page 15. Clytemnestra is listening to the chorus. The chorus here says, "It is very like a woman in command to concede gratitude before the facts appear. Too ready to persuade, a female ranges beyond her boundary, quick to move, but doom is quick, for rumor when a woman spreads it, and it is destroyed." So they dismiss women. The chorus is dismissing the importance of women, saying, oh, a woman in charge can't do her job particularly well. The chorus, and we're not going to look at a particular passage here, is just from pages 30 to 33. They won't listen to Cassandra. They dismiss what she claims to know is going to happen. They also call Aegisthus a woman in right before the passage I just read about him. So this is an insult. Calling a man woman was an insult. So again, we're seeing that women are viewed as the lesser sex. Clytemnestra says some interesting things. Let's look at page 18. She says, "For what light of day is sweeter for a wife to see than this, with the gates opened up when God has brought back her husband safely from campaign? Take this message away to my husband to come as soon as possible. He is the city's beloved darling. As to his wife, I wish he may find her when he comes just as faithful in his home as the one he left behind." Okay, obviously this is ironic because this is her posturing for the chorus, but everybody believes her. She says something similar on page 24. "For a wife to be separated from her husband and to sit at home alone is a terrible misery, when she hears many malicious rumors, with one man coming and then another with his cries bringing worse pain on top of pain for the house." So and then she continues to talk about how horrible it is for women to have to sit at home and wait. But she is just toying with the chorus here, setting up a mirage that works because they believe her. Last thing from this play, this is what she really thinks. "You test me like a witless woman, but I speak with a fearless heart to those who know. And whether you yourself wish to approve or to blame me, it's all the same. This is Agamemnon, my husband, but a corpse, the work of my right hand here, a just architect. This is how things are." She's basically saying women can be as strong as men. Okay, so some overall considerations that I want us to take very, very quickly. One thing to think about is how the chorus operates differently in each play. Remember, we talked about what these various choruses can do. In Antigone, they seem to be on the side of Antigone, trying to tell Creon what he should be doing. In Medea, they're definitely on Medea's side. It's a chorus of Corinthian women, so they lament with her. They agree with her in spirit, probably not with the action she takes. Whereas in Agamemnon, the chorus is certainly not on the side of Clytemnestra. And of course, also, the chorus in Agamemnon is, you probably found Agamemnon a little harder to read. That's because there's a lot of philosophizing happening with the chorus there, thinking about the nature of war and death. We don't need to go into that very much, but know that that's the stylistic difference. There's also significantly more time jumps in Agamemnon. And the chorus, again, remember, one of the things they can do is they can be there to demonstrate that time has passed. Clytemnestra has just heard that the war is over, the play is beginning, and Agamemnon's already home by midway through. So that's how time jumps working. We're not really seeing as many of those in the other two plays. One question to keep in mind is which of these women is most justified. I think the obvious answer is Antigone. But if we take her out of the equation, thinking about whether what Medea's done is right versus what Clytemnestra's done, both of them sort of take out a woman who's not responsible. Really, the young princess isn't really responsible for Jason wanting to marry her, and neither is Cassandra responsible for Agamemnon taking her as a prize. And just be thinking about what the male characters want and what they do. Are they just searching for power? Creon is obviously not after the same thing that Jason is after. So think about what it is that these male characters each want. And how is that different from what the female characters want? And obviously background is integrated in these little splotches, right? We do get some reminders of what each of these plays is about, but it is primarily assumed that this information would have been known. But we do see a little bit of it coming into the plays. Okay, that'll do it. Sorry, that took about as long as the last lecture, against what I promised. But I look forward to seeing what everybody has to say on the discussion boards. I will make sure you read the things I post there, because there will be a few bits of terminology and a few elements of the plays that haven't been discussed here that will certainly come up there. All right, thanks for listening.